best.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby union show. It's That Rugby Union Show, and welcome back.
Nursing a hangover after what we saw at Ellis Park last night. Well done to the Wallabies. They were absolutely superb, I thought, taking on the mighty Springboks and proving that you should never write off any of the rugby championship sides. 38-22 it finished. The Boks were up at 22-0 at a stage, 22-5 at halftime. And then it was all Wallabies all the way through. I think, Sim, as we reflect on what was not a very memorable performance by the Boks. The last points scored by the Springboks, were they in the 19th minute? Yeah, I think it was Mani in the 19th minute with his conversion.
That was it.
Yeah, and then after that, kinda, zip.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was... I've been through some stuff. So anyway, just to sort of like encapsulate how sort of like, or embarrassing for some people that result was, as a colleague who kind of like walked up to me before the game and he says, how do you think this is going to go? So I go, you know what, I think it'll be tight, 5 points. And like he nearly spat at my feet at my, conservativeness. Like, listen, dude, like it was almost one of those like I trusted you, like you know what you're talking about, but how could you possibly say they're gonna be, that close, to beating the Boks? And then the game starts and he's sitting in front of me at the stadium. And then we go like, we go 22-0 up. So I scream out to him and I say to him, hey, 5 points. And he starts giggling because, idiot, yeah. and then they go, I think it was 22-17, which was actually 5 points. So then I say, I scream again, hey, 5 points. And he looks at me, he's like, I know, as in shut up. I was like, jeez. And after he says, or like at the end of the game, he says, people lost money, man. So I look at him and he looks like he's about to cry. I'm like, was it you? He's like, no, it wasn't me. I'm thinking, I'm not so sure. So yeah, look, I think a lot of people were let down there. A lot of people thought they were in for a lot of money, and it didn't quite work out that way. But it's just looking at the performance itself, and that was one of the more insane games I've ever watched. Because when the Boks were going in that first 20 minutes, it was quite weird. I'd rarely seen that combination of physicality, intensity, and tempo, and execution. Obviously, because I got 3 tries in 20 minutes. I'd never seen that combination. It was almost like the perfect storm. And you're sitting there and you're thinking, and then like in the next 20 minutes, when it became kind of like 22-5. The Aussies kind of started stemming the bleeding, I thought, you know what, okay, the Boks, it makes sense. They've kind of like gone a bit ragged now, trying to replicate the first 20 minutes. I sat there and I thought, if they could hold that 20 minutes for like 40 to 60 minutes in a game, some really good teams are going to be put away by 50 points or something, And then obviously, then at the end of the game, you're looking at a defeat. So it was confusing for that, because you look at what the Boks were doing for 20 minutes and then you look at what happened over the next 60, and it's just bonkers. It's bizarre to try and sort of like analyze it. What happened? I don't know. Like, I mean, there's still a big part of me trying to like calculate and work it out. Like, what happened? What really happened? It's almost like the perfect storm blew itself out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm all in the game. Thanks for your comments, man. Rugby, cricket, and cricket not a great time for SA sport. We won't even talk about the other two because the cricket was equally disappointing because it was just a 2-wicket win and they did it with a ball to spare. So that's definitely heartbreaking after fighting back. But I listened to the press conferences, and Sim, you were there for both of them. Joe Schmidt said something which I found very interesting. Rassi also did. But Joe said, he's coached a long time. He said, I'm old. Everybody gave him a bit of a laugh for saying that. And he mentioned that sometimes a team can get ahead of itself, and he's seen it before when they're so confident, you start so well. And he didn't want to call it a soft start, but I think I understand what he's trying to say. We had a bit of a soft start, that's raining tries, seemingly very little effort, and teams can put the foot off the accelerator and almost think it's a foregone conclusion. So that was the one thing I found very, very interesting from Joe. And then Rassi, on the other hand, he called it Hondkak. I'm doing the translation. He said, we were dog shit today. That's how he put it.
I love that quote. I was just like, okay, and you're like, I wasn't right. I wasn't writing the fast reaction to to the press conference or to the match. But like when I passed on the audio to my colleague, I said, sorry, at this mark of the press conference, there's your headline. Just don't mess with it. It says we were dog shit because the fans would have been saying that in every pub. So you kind of like, you know what? Ricey spoke for every South African fan when he said that. But ironically, in writing, obviously, my sort of attempt at analyzing what happened, because, whether you're sure about what happened or not, you still have to analyze it for your particular public, that reads you. I actually quoted Joe Schmidt for what happened. Exactly that, what you're talking about. Basically saying that the Boks probably did get a little bit ahead of themselves and kind of thinking it's gonna be easy from here on in. Every time we go into contact, they're gonna fold. Every time we throw a lovely pass, it's gonna stick, not stick in the wrong hands. And every time we do something, it's just going to work in our favor. And obviously, the wheels came off. But in a strange way for me, again, it's my opinion, so take it with a pinch of salt. I think a performance like this has been a long time coming. You look at the build up to the test. Okay, let's start with the 4 games against the Barbarians, the 2 against the Italians, and 1 against Georgia. Obviously, we played against the inferior opposition, while the Wallabies obviously played against the British and Irish Lions, which basically meant, in terms of battle hardened, they probably were more battle hardened than we were. That's fair enough. But the second part of that was that first test against Italy. That was a similar sort of thing where we jumped to a biggish lead and then we just surrendered it. And then we were lucky there because Italy's obviously not the Wallabies. We could take the momentum back again. So that's why I'm saying it was always coming. And then you look at this past week. Now, I feel like, the performance itself, we didn't lose the performance based on the performance itself so much, but the thinking behind it. So you start with, naming a team on Monday. It's an unnecessary flex. I know what you know, but it's an unnecessary flex because, it's not like the players don't know they're the ones playing. You've told them already. So it's fine. You can tell us when you think, when you deem it to be okay to tell us, which is, usually for us Tuesday. And then you pick a team you pick a team, which is aimed at running them off their feet. You've got a number 8 who's an open side. Ironically, Sia actually played incredibly well at number 8. But when you lose, unfortunately, that stuff disappears, disappears into the ether and nobody cares. And so, you pick a number 8 that's atypical of the number 8 you've played in the 7 years you've been in charge. And then you go and like you play a 9 and a 10 that is just aimed at running all day long. And then you go 5-3 split. You're trying to run a team off its feet at altitude, and you go 5-3 split instead of 6-2 split. The 6-2 split probably, you basically grind their forwards into the ground first, right? At altitude. If you can tire their forwards out, there's not much else after that. You've done, that's like more than half the job done. But you also then introduce this weird clause when you name your team, that, oh, if they go 6-2 split, we're gonna go 6-2 split. They call you a bluff by going 6-2 split, and then you don't go 6-2 split. So I just think, like, a lot of the thinking behind the scenes, the Boks, when you look at them, sure, they're smart guys. They've got all these innovations that we've loved over all this time, but I think they kind of like blurring that very important line of, we just focusing on ourselves versus, oh, there's an opponent to plan for as well. Plan accordingly, plan for the opponent that you're going to get. Who's to say that with the Aussies naming their team on Thursday only, they didn't get more than enough time to do just the research they needed to do for, how do you beat these guys? And actually they did that and they came away with it. So I think I feel, in a way, the result was a long time coming, but also, most importantly, B, it's kind of like the wake up call, the Boks needed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on the wake up call thing because, there's a cascading effect to these things. Like you say, it now highlights all of these little things and games and mind games and whatever it is become a lot more important now that you've lost. I remember at one stage in the second half seeing the midfield line out and maul, and I turned to my cousin who was next to me and I said, this better lead to a try, otherwise it's going to be stupid. And unfortunately, it didn't lead to a try, and it just looked like over elaboration. There's a question here from one of the people joining us online. I must apologize for the lag in my stream, guys. It's Sunday morning. My computer's also got a bit of a hangover. That Rugby Union. What was the question? No, the question was, what did you think was... Oh, they were extremely sloppy after the first 25 minutes. Absolutely agree. But there was a question about what do you think South Africa's number one flaw is? And yeah, thanks very much for putting that up, Paul. And I thought, given what you said, Sim, about the build-up, what we saw against the Barbarians, against Italy, against Georgia, our lineup definitely didn't fire against weaker opposition. We struggled, and today it was laid bare that we really have problems with. It's the timing issue, throwing issues. I don't know what it is, but at the moment, not looking good. The breakdown, likewise, I thought the Georgians did phenomenally well in terms of contesting for the ball, slowing down the Springbok ball, and the Wallabies, like with Fraser McGright, have got just the tools that you need to try and turn over, slow down, and disrupt the opposition ball. So those two things were glaring for me. And then, of course, the one thing that Joe said is we could see, Joe Schmidt, that is, you could see what the Boks are like when they're accurate. And they were accurate in that first 25 minutes. So to answer your question, all in the game, and then they lost the accuracy in the second half. And he did speak about how close they came on a number of occasions where he felt the Wallaby defense was really, really stretched, and things should have led to Springbok tries, but a little bit of luck, a little bit of last-ditch tackle attempts, turnover, 70 meters, and it's a try for the Wallabies. So he was definitely sure to not say, yeah, we've come, we've achieved, we've conquered the mighty Springboks, and we're going to do it again next week. He said we were lucky, despite the scoreline, from what we saw there. So those three things, for me, really stand out. I really thought that we saw a couple of those cracks already against the Italians. I'm not going to count the Barbarians, and against the Georgians.
Yeah, and if you could add, if you could add the fourth thing, it was like, the more things didn't happen for the Boks after that first 20 minutes, the more sort of they, it was almost like plan A and plan A reinforced, instead of, okay, can we play percentages here to try and get ourselves, like sometimes with the kicking game, you can kind of cheat yourself into, you can cheat yourself into going forward, if that makes sense. If you getting stopped defensively at the gay line by the by the oh, that sounded an awful lot like the gay line instead of gain line. Sorry, it's intrusive thoughts. So in any case, like you kind of said, you like you can't make the yards in, you can't make the yards on the ground. Then try and make them. Remember how the kicking game was getting the very first try off the game. Was thanks to Tom Wright, who would score that 70-meter try, knocking on a box kick from Grant Williams. But then, after all of that success with the kicking game, where like they were nowhere. In all fairness, they were nowhere elsewhere as well. In the collisions and the scrums and whatever. But like we stopped doing those things. We stopped mixing the game up, and kind of like it was almost like the one team went to play test rugby, and the other one kind of like went to sort of experiment itself out, like carry on with this experiment. That's kind of like, I mean, I think the other issue was Rassie was saying, he said in Afrikaans in his press conference, he says poor Tony Brown was pulling his hair out. You'd think, obviously, because it's Tony ball to play. Apparently, he was pulling his hair out, saying the guys were overplaying, kind of like, kick it now, do this, do something a bit different. Don't keep passing and, hoping for the best. It was one of those, keeping on doing the same thing and hoping for a different result. So I think that would be the fourth thing to add to, what went wrong in sort of in general, and with the game, and specifically.
Sean, with a comment there saying arrogance on the Booker behalf. Look, I don't think that that the Springboks are arrogant themselves as individuals, but I do think the game plan, as Sim alludes to, was an arrogant one. And I think, was it in Townsville we played the Aussies, and we also went through and looked like we were playing sevens a couple of years ago in the rugby champs, and that just gave them the opportunity. They enjoyed the loose game. They loved it. They were, thank goodness, the Boks aren't here to scrum us. They're not here to beat us at the line out. They're not here to maul us into the ground. And I agree with you, Sim. I feel like there wasn't a reversion to plan B, and I said it last night in my reaction. There wasn't okay, boys, Tony ball is not working tonight. Let's keep it tight. Let's scrum these guys as often as we can. I think there was only 4 scrums that the Springboks won in that match, which tells me that you weren't playing towards your strengths as well. And I think that will be a well-timed wake-up call. Play test rugby first.
Yeah, I mean, look, the great example is the Aussies. Look at the team they picked. They picked a tight head prop who's 148 kilos, 1.84 meters, 100 kilos. Tight head lock who is 203 and 135. Guthrie Steenkamp reckons he's closer to 150 himself. So that's almost 300 kilograms just on 2 players, just on the tight head side of the scrum. We haven't spoken about Tom Hooper. I think Tom Hooper's about 115. So you add those guys, and then you've got Will Skelton, who's probably one of the greatest maul stoppers in the game today. He might have been, nowhere sort of in general play yesterday, because I don't think he damaged us, the way he kind of like manhandled the British and Irish Lions, because obviously he had a guy like Ibn there, and when you've got the big South African boys, they always target that big guy. I mean, I think at one stage he lost a collision to Andre Esterhuizen. So while he may not have been great in general play, we suddenly couldn't go to the maul because he was stopping the maul. And so you kind of have got to, they picked to nullify our strengths, and they picked to play test rugby. And, in the end, the team that picked to entertain almost themselves or to carry on an experiment, I almost need to defend the Boks about from the arrogance charge. And the only reason I'm trying to defend that is to say, look, I think ultimately these guys are kind of sitting in a space where they are like, we're trying to change how we play or give ourselves options. And the only way to actually be able to see if we're making progress is to keep trying that kind of stuff. And so they're trying it. And the simple truth, we've always said, oh, geez, the Boks play boring rugby, maul it up, scrum it up, get penalties, pop them over, defend hard, kick it up, or pick up the scraps and go score. Oh, so boring. They went properly ball in hand, razzle dazzle in that first 20 minutes and still lost. Now, the question you got to ask yourself is, okay, do we now go? Do we throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, this doesn't work? Or do we build on that 20 minutes? I think most rational people would say, well, you got to build on that 20 minutes because that was the real deal. But then the other question becomes, are you willing to take defeats like we've just taken from the Wallabies, while you try to develop that kind of game for an unprecedented, second successful defense of the World Cup in 2 years' time. So that's kind of, there's, you can't just say they're being arrogant, just because. If there was arrogance, it would have been from our fans. I mean, I just kept hearing people saying, we're going to smash them. It was almost as if nobody had watched the British and Irish Lions series. Like, I just assumed that, we were going to walk them like that was probably not cool. I'm not sure they were arrogant, but they can be, the coaches in particular, can be charged, of sort of like blurring the line between sort of being smart and hubris. Like there is a bit of like we're becoming a bit insular, where like we're starting to think the opposition doesn't matter, or what the opposition do doesn't matter. As long as you're going to play against another team, you still need to act like their strengths need to be nullified first, and then your strengths, to try and sort of overcome the way, to overcome as a result. So I think that's where, for me, the break is. Whereas actually, I don't necessarily think they're arrogant, but yeah, they are sort of sipping a little bit of their Kool-Aid though.
Yeah, just a little bit of the coolie coolie.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for the comments. It's fantastic to see, which tells me that we should do this after next week's test in Cape Town as well. Let's get through to those comments. But first, I know my man Paul's got something for you. Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, we want you to be part of That Rugby Union Show family. Then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure you join us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than Rassie finds loopholes in World Rugby's rulebook. There are new episodes every week. Don't miss it. Hey, Paul, don't show us crying Springboks and Drickus and all of this. You're just making it worse. But we've got a ton of comments. I appreciate them. Let's get through these quickly before we wrap it up. Thanks again for everybody who's jumped in on the chat. We love hearing from you. Sean, also speaking about the short kickoff looked dumb because I mentioned that the midfield line-out maul just didn't look great, especially when you're losing. So I think Sean is adding to that. All in the game with a couple of questions and comments as well. Do you think Rassie sometimes buys a little bit too much into his own hype? I think Sim has answered that about, maybe drinking a little bit too much of our own Kool-Aid, taking away from consistently doing the basics right. And we didn't do a lot of the basics. And there you go, Sean as well. Again there, saying sad. What did you call it? What did you say there, Sean? I actually
sad
missed that
USA
comment.
folk went to Northern Hemisphere rugby.
There you go. There you go. We're not even going to talk about the All Blacks because that's another match that we should touch on very, very briefly.
Listen, speaking of getting carried away, I wouldn't get too carried away about the Boks losing this week.
No.
They haven't become a bad team overnight, so they needs to, this whole getting carried away thing cuts both ways. We got to be careful not to,
I think there is value in what you said earlier. You know, a kick up the proverbial is definitely something that was long due for the Springbok team. I mean, to win back-to-back World Cups and then to come back last year, win the Rugby Champs, see off the All Blacks, you know, not even be tested by the Australians, maybe even undermining and forgetting what the Argentines are all about, and then going on an end-of-year tour and it's all sunshine and roses and you're successful and you play the Barbars with youngsters, you've got junior Springboks coming into the... I understand why it's easy to think that, okay, this is an unbeatable team. But back to the comments, Burning Lash, I think agreeing, saying the Boks problems are different from what people think. We are so accurate and skilled that we can do those first 20 minutes to any team, but it's not a sustainable way to play for 80 minutes. And I think that ties into what you were saying, you know, change it up. But the first 20 minutes was great to see.
Look, the thing is, they're trying to do to make it sustainable, which is exactly their challenge. You know, they challenge is trying to do almost something nobody else has tried to do before, because they've got the depth. So because they've got so much depth, they now almost need to play as many of those guys as possible and get them sort of tuned into that. The point of having depth is, can you swap any guy at any time and get no sort of lag in performance, as it were. And so that's what they're trying to do. So they have to, if they are going to persist with trying to play like this, they're going to have to play like this more and more often until they get it right. Again, it goes back to that question: how much losing can we as the fans take? And I think we're not going to be able to take that many. Look at this. So I'm going to give you like a sign of just how potent that first 20 minutes was. I'm going to read you a couple of stats. I had a look at the Rugby Championship stats. So the most carries went to South Africa. That's, despite, having disappeared for the last 60 minutes of the game. The most clean breaks went to South Africa. They made the most meters running. And then this is where it gets interesting. The tackles, we had an 80% tackle rate, which is the fourth and obviously the worst of all the teams. The line out was 68%. Offloads, they've got 14, which is first. So it was all the pretty stuff and not the hard stuff. Even the rugs, sure, they won 95% of their rugs, but it still makes them fourth after four teams. And so I think the numbers are actually quite damning in terms of, it's like, yes, South Africa have bought into an attacking game, but the question to ask is it at the expense of their DNA, the things they do particularly well, which is defend, be borderline violent at rucks, and the scrums were fine because there weren't many. I think Ben O'Keefe kept playing so much advantage whenever there was. I've never seen so much advantage for those knock-ons. It was just like teams knocking on like twice each, and you're still on advantage to both of them, and you're just like, hang on, wait, there comes a time when you need to stop this. And I think it actually worked in the Aussies' favor that they didn't have to scrum as much as they should have, because if you get them to scrum again, you sap that energy away from them. And so it's all those things. As good as the Bok performance was in that first 20 minutes, there were so many loopholes in such critical areas. Said areas being not having to scrum enough at the scrums. That's the first one, and the second one is the lineouts just basically falling apart, and then obviously the ruck situation just going from cat burglary to armed robbery. So you add all of those things up, and then no game management. You look at them, they had two halfbacks whose combined age is 70, dude. That's a lot of experience at halfback, and that's kind of like also where the game was won.
It is.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're now all getting into the situation where we're going, oh, do we still need Andre Pollard? If ever there was a game that says you might still need a guy like Andre Pollard. It was yesterday's game.
Yeah, and well done to James O'Connor. I thought he looked a little bit rattled in that first quarter,
First
but then they
20,
came
he
back
was
and they
nowhere.
effectively won the second quarter. He
Yeah,
was
exactly.
nowhere. They stretched them, and the way he I think settled down and then grew into the game. That's what experience buys you. Ronald Higgins, thanks for your comments, saying it hurts more because it was in our own home, our own fortress. Ronald, I agree with you, especially given what Sim was talking about. Statistically, the Springboks should have probably won that game. And I looked at the territory because it felt like we were camped in the Aussies' half, and we were. 61% of territory going the way of the Springboks, 52% of the possession. And as Sim said, we had more run meters, we had more passes out of hand. I think it was 212 versus 135. And ordinarily, that would dictate that you win the game. The one thing that this Aussies statistically Sim did more than we did was kick out of hand. And Rassi even mentioned it in his press conferences. I think they had 29 kicks from hand and we had about 18. And that just tells me that they were utilizing a wider game plan in
Yeah.
order to try and beat the opposition.
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying. One team played to win a game of rugby, a test match. This one test match, not to win. The 2027 final. I felt like we kind of picked for the 2027 final in terms of what we're doing, which is fair enough. I support what the Boks are trying to do because I can see what it is and where it's going. But the upshot is, as Ronald says, it hurts more because it was at Ellis Park where teams basically go to die, particularly the Wallabies. Um,
Yeah.
you look at the table now. You've got the Boks. As it turns out, they only third on the table instead of fourth because New Zealand beat Argentina by 17 points instead of the 16 we lost by. And so, either way, we've got no points after having played at our fortress, which now turns, the situation, we've been talking about, again, that's the other issue. We've been talking about Auckland the whole time as if the Aussies weren't even in the picture. And
Yeah.
now, thankfully, we're going to have to focus on the Aussies in
Right.
Cape Town and hopefully win that. But either way, we're now probably in a situation where we have to win twice in New Zealand, which I don't think we've done since readmission. Two in a row. I haven't seen it. So that's kind of where the big issues are
Yeah.
now. So it'll be interesting to see how things how it all goes.
Okay, let's wrap up the comments. Thanks very much for that, Ronald. Also asking the question: do you think the squad is chopping and changing, or that the squad's chopping and changing is hurting our continuity? And I think Sim spoke to that. That we still want to try everything. We still want to try and play Tony ball. We still want to be this expansive side. And I do think it's going to have a knock-on effect on the selections because Rassi did say in his press conference, "Well, I'd already selected the team for Cape Town. I knew the team for Johannesburg, but now he has to look closer at personnel." I'm going to bring in Burning Lash's comments on your answer here because he highlights Apele Lefasi feeling that he was out of position often. And I think that there's a lack of confidence at the moment with Fasi, maybe with Damien Willemse as well. Great players, but you need the confidence.
Yeah, look, I mean, you have to remember that I think both players actually spent an awful lot of time not playing in the URC, a fair bit of time injured in the URC. So you need to get that confidence back, and the only way you can get it is by being in the saddle. Put it this way, you've got to ask yourself an interesting question, which is which way would you rather go? Would you rather play Fussy, who is obviously very quick, and or Damien, who are both young, quick, agile, whatever, to try and execute this game, which is played at breakneck speed, or do you want to go to Vili, who's 36 and not as fast, you know he's not gonna, you know he's not gonna break the line with a raid from fullback anymore, or do you want to go back to Vili? So that's also like a little bit of a conundrum that they probably have at fullback. So they've now got a choice: do you nurse these guys back to form, or do you sort of make a different call, which is to go with Vili? I suspect simply because of where things are and the kind of game we might sort of compromise game we might opt to play next week in Cape Town. You might actually see Vili come back because Vili is that second playmaker. It's one thing to if you're
Yeah.
not confident, how are you going to be that second playmaker? How are you going to see the space, and how are you going to sort of find it and exploit it?
Right. Somebody asked here for a quick. We're going to wrap it up now. All in the game. Thoughts on the New Zealand Argentina game. I must admit, I'm still going to watch that one in its entirety. But it finished 41-24. Very similar scoreline to what we saw at Ellis Park. The Los Pumas made a ton of changes before this match, and they are trying to obviously plan for the future. You can see it. The age profile of that team is getting younger. So I think that Felipe Contepomi would have been anticipating some teething issues with the young team and blooding young talent. But yeah, I thought the Aussies, I thought the New Zealanders, I beg your pardon, for their part, looked good.
Yeah, look, it doesn't matter what Argentina are doing, and Argentina are obviously like a bit of a basket case, because if you look at their season so far, they had that British and Irish Lions warm up game that they won, and then
Yeah.
and then played a weekend England over 2 weekends and lost both weekends. And you're like, hang on, wait, boys, how do you beat like a team that's made up of like Scotland, England, Ireland, and Wales, and then you can't beat one English side that's weakened, and then then New Zealand gets there. Usually you don't like to go to Argentina. It doesn't matter who you are, because they make it, their fans make it uncomfortable, their players make it uncomfortable. And, so for New Zealand to have gone there and put 40 points over them obviously means we need to respect New Zealand, probably a bit more than we would have when we were watching them squeak past a third string French side, in July. So we probably need to pay them more
Yeah.
respect. But now, as things stand, these, the Antipodeans, how do you pronounce that? New Zealand and Australia, they now have,
Yeah.
they hold all the
Antipodeans.
cards. Yeah, they hold the cards now, because they are the away teams that have already won. And if either
Yeah.
of them burgles another away win next weekend, then that team is has basically as good as set themselves up to win the rugby championship. That's the margins we're talking here.
Yeah, very fine margins, all in the game. Thanks for that. Will Jordan, 15, just incredible. He's also good on the wing. They really do have a lot of talent. And just to wrap it up, I don't know if you watched, I didn't get up in time for Drikas and Hamza Chimaev. And given what I saw, glad I didn't. He gave a nice little interview with Joe Rogan afterwards, and he was very complimentary of Chimaev, and sort of saying, he lay on top of me like a blanket. Once he gets on top of you, he's like a blanket. You can't move and morph. And I kind of felt that's what the Aussies did to the Springboks at Ellis Park. Did you catch any of that? You
No, no,
see, now I don't even want to go back and watch the fight now, because I
I just
didn't.
caught the highlights. But yeah, this like you lay on top of me like a blanket. That's an interesting quote.
Yeah, yeah. No
Yeah, like
Viete, no Viet, no.
in winter in South Africa, you look forward to having a blanket over you. Was it a wet blanket? I'm a bit confused. And of course, if you say,
Everyone.
if you say the Wallabies kind of like lay on top of us like like blankets. Listen, when you got Will Skelton at 203 meters and 149 kilos, listen, some blanket to get off you. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, I saw the
It's
highlights,
a
and
hell of a blanket.
he's right. They spent so much time on the floor. I barely saw them sort of strike,
Yeah.
which sometimes can make. I'm not an expert or a particular fan, but it can make
Mm.
UFC a bit boring. Just guys like laying on top of each other. They've even got a move that's called the full mount, which just doesn't sound right. But anyway, it's a story for another day.
No, it doesn't sound right at all. But yeah, and if they are on the ground with Shimaev, that's what he does. He grapples, he wrestles. He's really good at it. You're hardly going to beat him. But I'm sure Dricus will fight back.
Strikers, mate.
Final thought I will give to I'll give to Swift S&P, saying it's better for us to suffer a couple of losses now with the chopping and changing of players than to get kicked out of the group phases of a World Cup. And maybe that's why this doesn't hurt as much. We've been in dire straits as Springbok fans before. We're not in dire straits now. We suffered a really terrible loss, but I think we all feel like we have the personnel, we have the coaching group in place to turn things around. For the remainder of the season, and that's a good thing. So yeah, it's not the end of the world. It hurts, and it hurts that it was at Ellis Park, and let it not happen again in Cape Town, but it does set things up quite nicely for that test in Cape Town. It means we will take the Aussies seriously. I expect we're going to try and be physical, like you said, do what we do best in that match. And, our fans like seeing that. We want to see our Boks dominate opposition, physically on the field as well, and score the nice tries. We'll have like a Cheslin back, I'm sure. I wonder if they're going to be changes, so keep a close eye on the socials. We'll be on before that match, and given all the chats and the fun we've had today, we'll definitely do it again next Sunday. Sim, thanks very much, man. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to add one last thing. The really good thing about, just to obviously support that point by Swift is, one of the things the chopping and changing is doing is it's almost like a natural sort of selection of which of the current back-to-back world champions in that team get to go to Australia or not. So it's all along the way. You would have looked at yesterday and there would have been one or two of the senior players you thought, hang on, wait, he wasn't at the races at all. Those guys are sitting there. They've got two choices. Either they get back on, into the kind of form that got them there in the first place, or they start getting weeded out of the team. So that's what's good about, what the Boks are going through. They do have to chop and change because we've said this a million times on this podcast, which is there are literally, I think, about 15 of the guys that have won the last two World Cups who will be 35 and over in 2027. You cannot afford to take that many of them. Not even at this game that we're trying to play, because they're just not going to be able to keep up with it either. And so I think people are going to be weeded out by, a combination of the chopping and changing, some of these defeats, and just the way the Boks want to play.
Thanks very much for that, Samuel. Catch us again. We'll definitely be back on before the next test match. Look out for the socials. Give us a like, share, subscribe. And thanks very much for the comments. Love it. Love interacting with you. And share this with anyone who you think might... I don't know if this is going to be a pick-me-up, because it was devastating result from a Springbok fan point of view. But please do share it. We love it. It helps the algorithm as well. We'll catch you again next week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sim. Cheers. Hey guys, if you like what you see and you want to support the show, we want you to be part of That Rugby Union Show family. Then just hit the like button, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, make sure you join us every time we're on. Slap that bell harder than Rassifying's loopholes in World Rugby's rulebook. There are new episodes every week. Don't miss it. That Rugby Union Show. Well, what a week it's been.
Playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby union show. That Rugby Union Show.